Hello, Buff Nation, and welcome to Day 3 of the NCAA Social Media Diversity and Inclusion Campaign. Today is Belonging Is, and we are presenting to you guys our new podcast series, Hear Our Heard, where it's a roundtable of student athletes. We have 4 student athletes with us, and they're just giving us their experience of how they feel like they belong as people of color on a predominantly white institution. Before we start, we do use a lot of acronyms in our conversation. PWI means predominantly white institution, PLC means people of color, BIPOC means Black and Indigenous people of color, HBCUs means historically Black universities and colleges. We do have some ground rules for our conversation. Please think about this as you watch and if you may comment. This dialogue did take our student athletes being very vulnerable, so we want you to consider these ground rules. Number 1 is this is a dialogue and not a debate. We are all coming together just to talk openly and vulnerably. We do not need an argument. Number 2, assume good intent but recognize your impact. Now what you say, you might assume like, hey, we're trying to be nice people, but not always does it come across that way. It might affect the other person and your impact is key. Number 3, accept other people's reality. Just because you haven't experienced it, don't discount other people's experience. Number 4, use I statements. We want you to understand that these are your statements and your feelings. Don't assume that you can comment for everybody else. Number 5, listen to learn. Do not just listen to listen. Actually take in what people are saying. Number 6, allow others to learn what you already know. Number 7, utilize a brave space. We're asking people that this is a safe space. They're being vulnerable, so please recognize that this is a brave space. Number 8, be respectful. Remember the platinum rule. Remember, treat others the way they want to be treated, not you. Thank you. We hope you enjoy the discussion.
My name is Dominic Williams. I'm a grad student transfer on the track and field team.
I'm Jada Drame. I'm a senior on the track and field team.
My name is Jalil Moon. I'm a senior on Spirit.
My name is Janai Sami. I'm a junior here on the track and field team.
What does belonging mean to you?
Belonging to me really means that I'm in a space that I feel safe and that I feel content in. When I go there, I'm not thinking about like who's there and what's going to happen. It's just like I can walk in and feel comfortable.
I think belonging means like being able to physically and mentally be accepted and just having that comfort zone, how it's like it's expand and just, being welcomed.
Yeah, I agree for the most part. I like what you said earlier about it being a safe space. Just when I think about where I belong, it's the place that I've chosen to be at, and like the people I've chosen to surround myself with, and it's because they make me feel, like you said, safe, and no matter.
Yeah, I feel like safety is like a huge thing that a lot of people don't take into account. Like you could feel comfortable in certain positions and then other people don't feel comfortable because they genuinely don't feel safe. Or like even going further, being like, I belong in this, like belonging isn't necessarily fitting in, like, or well, it is fitting in, but like not necessarily like aligning with everything that you are with. Like just because you're Black doesn't mean you only fit in with Black people. Like it's kind of like fitting in and like aligning with others.
Can you name places where you feel like you belong?
Yeah, I think one of the first things that comes to mind for me is I'm a part of BSA, which is Black Student Alliance, and it's huge. It's a place that, not just athletes, but students everywhere across campus get to come together and just have a safe space and talk and just be together with each other, which is huge. It's just one of the most fun things to look forward to every week, just showing up and all your friends are going to be there and they're just talking about what's going on, or it might be like a formal or something, but just knowing that there's a place that you can go, there's a place that you can exist, that everyone looks like you, everyone understands what it's like to be you. So BSA is definitely probably one of the first things I think of.
I personally feel like I really belong with athletics, which is kind of lame, but I feel like I've definitely found a home here, and I think it is partially due to the higher levels of POCs. Like you can feel more comfortable, you like eat lunch together, practice together, spend time together. Like everyone kind of came from similar backgrounds, especially like when you're an athlete, like you have that like importance of sport, and so everyone kind of understands just like that value of performance and achievement through athletics. So I feel like that is like one part that people, you're like, those just align.
I mean, for me, transferring in, I transferred in last year. It has been kind of a struggle to find a place like that sometimes, but I think I've found it strangely enough in the lunchroom, kind of like Jada said. Like, I sit there, my teammates come sit with me, and some random other teams come sit. And it's just a place that you can be very casual and just talk about your day or your life or what's going on, and you'll just hear funny stuff and things going on. So, right now, I guess for me, the probably number one place would be the lunchroom. Just having a good time, eating some food.
How do you navigate being at a PWI?
I don't know. I feel like being a part of athletics, it's a little bit removed. Maybe it's because of COVID that we were kind of kept in a bubble, so to say, and like all the other students went home. So we kind of built a community here, but like I said before, there's more PWIs in this community, so it is easier to navigate. I wasn't always a student athlete though, so I was just a regular student, and navigating, I guess, I didn't realize how many things weren't built for me here until like looking back and being like, oh, that was kind of like against me. Like that wasn't something, like I don't know.
Yeah, kind of like almost like in a neutral sense, like in ignorance almost too, like not having certain things for you. Definitely, I would resonate with that sentiment and say that like throughout my experience, it's I always say like I kind of internalized my blackness in the sense that I know who I am as a black man because of how I grew up and because of my parents. And I went to predominantly white institutions throughout my education. I went to private school, middle school, predominantly white high school, predominantly white undergrad, predominantly white university here. And so my blackness had to come from not my university, but had to come from the community that my parents built for me. So for me, navigating was like that. I didn't expect them to have anything, right? I didn't look at it like, oh, they don't have this, and that upsets me. I looked at it like, well, I've always done Black History Month with my family or Martin Luther King Day parades with them, and it's never been a part of my formal education. But like, I think in this day and age, we're all recognizing how messed up that is that, other ethnicities, not just Black, but, histories aren't taught in formal education and how that can affect us when we're at PWIs, because we're basically not being taught our own history.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I kind of had the opposite experience. Obviously, I'm half white, but I grew up in a majority minority community for majority of my life. So I grew up, being like the white boy in my neighborhood. So when I came to Boulder, it was a culture shock. Like I was like, oh, there's like white folk everywhere. Like it's snowing up here. But I think the biggest, most important part for me is in order to just make myself feel comfortable, and athletics is a great place for this. We talked about you got to seek out your space, and I just went and found my circle, and it's not that bad. But at the end of the day, CU is a PWI. It's a majority white school ran by white people for white people, and that comes with its issues. And I think that's definitely something, athletics does a pretty good job. But, there's always room for improvement and stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I grew up kind of the similar as you. High school was mainly like diverse, so I never really had to uh, think of like the problems going here until I actually got here. Then I kind of went through a cultural shock. Being a Pacific Islander, I was obviously thrown into people of color, which wasn't a problem for me. I loved it. I love getting to know people and I love knowing other cultures, so it was never a problem for me. And then definitely my freshman year here, I couldn't say, I think the only friend I had was my mom because I was just too scared or just nervous to go out there and talk to other people. And it was definitely strange in my classes as well. I felt like I was the odd one out. Majority of my classes had predominantly white people in it, and it just felt like I was unwelcomed. And then the athletic department was definitely like a comfort to me. Just like in my head, I was like, yes, there's more colored people. So I start coming around here more. But Yeah, definitely. I think my second year, even though COVID did hit, I was able to be in that bubble, like Jada said, when we were around the athletics, and we kind of got more comfortable getting to know each other, and then finding our like safe space, and it kind of made things better. I definitely feel like I wish I were to find my safe space freshman year, cause yeah, felt a little alone, I guess you might say. Um, yeah, I didn't have an athletic roommate either, so it was just a student here at CU. Couldn't really get along with people. It was hard to find people to see if we have something in common. But yeah, I want to say so far my third year, as of right now, has definitely gotten better. I've gotten to actually expand myself and communicate with others, get to know other people. So it's definitely better.
Yeah, I think one thing you talked about that I think is really important is you talked about like with like just understanding like the history and with specifically Black people. Something that I think the athletics is doing really well is just learning more about that. Like this year, we had a bunch of people go down to the Juneteenth parade. I don't remember how many of you guys went, but it was really fun and just important. That's a huge day in Black history, so it's just nice to see that athletics is participating in stuff like that. Um, and I think, you know, the school could take a page out of athletics book with stuff like that, just because, like I said, it is such a big day. Um, yeah. And just understanding. I think a lot of people don't know what, like, even Juneteenth is, you know, like,
Yeah,
you
this
ask
year we
most
kind of
people.
saw a reckoning with that. It
Yeah.
was interesting. I've been interning with the city and county of Denver economic development for the last like 4 months, and the day of Juneteenth, all these companies were coming out and like, oh, we're giving a break, we're giving a day off for Juneteenth. It's a national holiday, kind of like in this immediate white guilt that rushed people to have these break days, and so we got an email that morning that we were having a half day in the office, and I was like, I'm grateful for it, but it was also the sense of just like, just like we don't want to be the ones to not.
Yeah.
And it's a positive move, but it's also like a move that you're like, yeah, is it performative?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
But
that's a big problem, I feel like, with any institution. You see a lot of it's like systematically, you know, they're improving, but you know, systematically, it's a white institution. Um, and I think something that we can really work on is we need to be more proactive and not reactive, like you talked about. It doesn't need to be like, oh, like everyone's else doing this, let's hop on this bandwagon. It needs to be, you know, get ahead of the curve. I think would be huge.
yeah, seeking out ways to advance ourselves can be so difficult, just personally and professionally, and just like especially these institutions who, like you said, are ingrained and like in the same sense that are built for white people historically they are, and like we have to think about in the presence as being people of color, how do we fit into these institutions? And like, I mean, in my undergrad, I was the first homecoming king ever, but that meant I was the first Black one, I was the first LGBTQ, I was the first everything. And so when you put it into that framework of it was 2018 and I'm the first whatever, a lot of these institutions are still, dealing with those things. And so how do we come up as students and administration with us to be like, this is an issue. It's not like glaring, but it's an issue to us. And so, but CU has been positive in that aspect. I think they do take ownership of, past mistakes sometimes, and it can really help to create these conversations like we're having now. So.
What ways as a university do you think we can be proactive rather than just doing performative justice pieces?
I feel like just educating. I feel like that's such like a cop-out answer, but just knowing, like, we did our Buffalo Fiesta and we educated everyone else about Hispanic and Latinx culture, like stuff like that. Then like I didn't even know a bunch of stuff about that.
We learn that sometimes the simplest answer is like the most correct one, and it's educating. Like people are ignorant of things that they just don't know. So like, I have a friend ask me about Black history or like something about being LGBTQ. It's like, me and Janai had a conversation just recently, and it was like, you have these conversations, and it's this weird balance of we're really close. So when she asks me those questions, I don't mind. But versus if a lady comes up to me on the street, I'm like, you don't know me well enough to be asking these questions of me. This is something you could research yourself. And so education is super big on that. And it's like, how do we do that even outside of these month and heritage days? Like we have Black History Month and everything's, like blackity black, black, black. And then it kind of goes away. And it's like, what does continual education look like? And I think it goes back to that formal education piece we were talking about, if we're not taught our history and then we're given a day, a month or whatever, a week to celebrate it, that's going to be intense. That's going to be fun. That's going to be awesome. But if you're not continually learning it, then people can miss out on that because people get busy, life happens, or you're just not exposed to that. So I think education is big. How do we get that in? We get into the schools. That's a whole another conversation, but I would agree. Education, I think, is so big for
I
that.
feel like it's also that like genuine interest, like the internet is free. So if you have a question, like you can Google it, or if you do have someone who's close enough that you can ask them a question. In one of my classes, we talked about instead of calling people out, like calling people in. So if someone says something insensitive and like their meaning behind it, they're not trying to be disrespectful. Like, instead of being like, hey, like instead of saying that word, like this is what we prefer instead, or like that, like that's outdated, like stuff like that. Just educating other people by instances, and instead of like, let me sit down and teach you all about this. Like today we're gonna learn about Black History Month and Juneteenth, and this is the first thing, like that type of stuff.
Yeah. I definitely agree with what you said with exposure. Like some students, they really don't have like that exposure. And I'm grateful for my friends. I feel like my friends are very diverse, so I can ask a bunch of questions if I want to. And when we get intense about it, like I said, me and Dom did have our conversation, and I did ask him like, coming off of this, I don't want to seem disrespectful, but I was really curious about it. And it was just really interesting how much just a different perspective of things opened up like reality in my life, and how I can understand that, especially when he asked me stuff about my culture, because the population of Pacific Islanders here is always low. It's always going to be low in universities. So it's really nice when my friends ask me stuff and they're like, is this disrespectful? Like, I think people are too shy to ask questions like, because they think if they ask, it will be disrespectful. But I think they need to ask questions. Like curious questions need to be answered so that like everybody can get that exposure that they need,
But like
especially
also
in this
with like
university.
questions, like there's a time and a place.
Definitely.
Like, yeah, so don't
One
just
on
like
one, yeah.
go up to someone and be like, hey, so by the way, like
Yeah,
in front of everyone,
no.
you're like, what?
Yeah, especially in front of other people, getting a different crowd. There's different
Yeah.
opinions, and that's I think where a lot of tension can create. So
Yeah, I think what all you guys are talking about, is just so true, is we just got to keep our allies responsible. We got to hold them responsible, and that means our white teammates, our white coaches, stuff like that. You can't expect them to be. This word has such a negative connotation, but it's the perfect word, is ignorant, right? Just like the lack of knowing. There's so many people who you don't grow up in a community like that. You don't grow up around Black people. You're not going to immerse yourself in that culture. You're not going to understand certain things. So you can't expect them to do everything right, but you can hold them responsible. And I think what you guys talked about that's really important is you don't do the work for them, right? You say, hey, here's where you can go. So like you said, internet's free. Like I don't teach anybody about why you shouldn't say the N-word at this point. Like you should know that. If you don't, go look it up. Or like people who don't, like when you like someone does like blackface and they don't understand what's wrong with it, like I'm not gonna teach you what a minstrel show was, like you can go figure out the history behind that and why that was so controversial, and like just like the systematic representation that it's had since, in TV shows and stuff like that. You see that still exists today, but I'm not gonna teach you that. Like I learned it, you can go find out yourself. So keeping our allies responsible while also making them do the work,
Do you think that we're in a culture where minorities have to acclimate when they come to a PWI, while others do not have to acclimate to minorities' cultures?
No, I definitely think that's the expectation. I mean, I'm sure all of you guys understand like code switching and stuff like that. Like you come to CU, you're in a professional environment, you're all white people, like you have to like talk a certain way that might not be how you talk around your folk, So I think that's one thing. And I think it's getting better. But I think more white people, and not all obviously, but I think that, they just learn to hide and not learn to like learn. If they're going to be ignorant, I think they've learned not to do it so openly. So I think that's the biggest thing. But I don't know. I mean, if you put a white person who grew up in a majority white community in a majority minority community, they would also acclimate. Like I've had like white people come to my school, and like at first, like they might be ignorant, but like you give them a few years, they'll learn. They'll get right.
I think acclimation, yeah, it's just like part of the human condition, just to acclimate to whatever environment you're in, socially or even just like physically. And in the same sense, like you said, like they would acclimate because they be the minority. And I would say that, yeah, it's expected of us to, like you said, to talk professionally or whatever else. And, people used to say it all the time when I was a kid. I went to a majority white middle school, so I spoke very proper English and I didn't really use a lot of slang. So I went to a public high school that was very diverse, and people be like, "Oh, you talk white," and I'll be like, "Talk white? I'm talking proper English. That's the one I was taught, and that's the one I know how to speak. I don't know how to talk white or black or any other thing." And so I think like there is like an assumption though, like you said, like for when we come to these PWIs that we almost have to hide ourselves a bit, and like we have to change some of our slang because they won't know it, or we have to kind of protect who we are in a sense by acclimating. And like, not that acclimating is horrible. You have to do it in life. You have to change the environment you're in. But it does like it's one of those things that I was kind of ignorant of coming in like to PWIs is that yeah, like when I'm around majority black communities, I speak so differently and I move so differently, and I'm probably generally happier and a lot less worried about like what I'm saying and how I'm saying it because I know I'm just like in a safe space. And that's, we kind of came back to that, I guess, big circle, coming back to those safe spaces and like being able to not have to acclimate. Like I can talk how I talk no matter what situation I'm in. Versus, I mean, there's a professional level, of course, but if I'm just walking down the hallway, I shouldn't have to change who I am.
Yeah. I feel like it's like you kind of have to hold yourself to a certain standard that's like you just can't be yourself. Like, and everyone can be themselves, but if you're a PWI or if you're a POC and a PWI, you can kind of, you just could be on 10 all the time. Like, just like stand up straight, like put on a good face because you're almost trying to hide like that stereotype of, I would say like black people, like uneducated. So you're like, oh, like I'm gonna try to rise above that and like stand a little taller, speak a little more clear, so then people don't think like I'm not like them, like that type of thing.
Yeah, I definitely believe that people of color do have a higher expectations of how they should be in public and how they like should act, only because the littlest things can really have like a huge setback on them, depending on what situation they're in and how they might be viewed, and then that's when just everything just starts to go different.
I mean, when you say that, I mean, what comes directly to my mind is, situations with police officers or things like that. Like I've had to learn to, like as a 6'3", 300-pound black man, especially from the South, from Louisiana, I've had to learn to move differently and to do things differently. And because me raising my voice is going to come across a lot more aggressive to them usually than if somebody else would raise their voice, even if they're around the same stature as me. I think my skin color and does do that, and like so, part of that is like I have to know that like if I'm in a meeting and I feel passionately about something, I have to take a deep breath, articulate it, because if I go out and like just show straight emotion, next thing you know, people go, Dom was yelling in a meeting and he was being really rude and it was horrible. But if a white coworker or somebody else does that, it would be, oh, they were super passionate and it really convinced me. And it's like we can't move the same way, which sucks. And it's just part of that kind of just really being in that safe space where you can find places that you can do that.
No, yeah, I agree. Being the only girl and having 3 older brothers, they're 6'6" and tall, they're big as can be, obviously. Even though I'm the youngest, I do get this sense of protection that I need when they're in public. Like like not necessarily fear for their safety, but I'm always concerned. I feel like I want to have some sense of protection over them just because of their physical features. It comes off as a threat, but when you actually see them, they're the biggest teddy bears you'll ever meet. They're gentle giants, genuinely, except for the third one here on the football team. So for my advice to someone of color that comes to PWI, I just genuinely think you have to step out of your comfort zone and actually go and seek your safety spaces. And you have to be more open about it too. There were some things that I've seen with the culture shock that I spoke about earlier that it made me want to just stay in my room, in my corner. I only wanted to go to class and practice, and that's it. I was just too scared to like go out there and expand myself. But definitely meeting others and just getting to know them and accepting your surroundings, and not being scared to go out there and find your like demand your safe spot anywhere in your like where you're at basically, or some sort.
That's a good point. I mean, coming here, transferring in, didn't grow up in Colorado, so I grew up in a majority diverse community. Had a lot of black folk, BIPOC folk, Hispanic folk in my neighborhoods and in my community, and so coming here, it's definitely a culture shock. I think we all experience, and it's so hard sometimes because you can be hard to find people that look like you. Back home it wouldn't be too hard to find somebody that looks like me. Here I'm kind of like on the street. I'm like, oh hey, how you? Hey. You kind of wave a little extra harder, but in the same sense, I have really found such a positive and uplifting community in the sense of a desire to get better and to be more diverse, but also an understanding that they aren't. Currently, like every time I experience something, I feel like people kind of do point out that, if there's a panel speaking, they're like, okay, we need to have people of color, women, more diverse people on this panel to show, that we reach out to more than just the majority. And so there's a reckoning / an awareness to it, but yeah, it's hard. I mean, especially like I didn't think I would have to struggle with like finding people that look like me. I mean, with athletics, no, but like, so I think like Janai said, forcing your safe space, like, it doesn't sound like you should. It's kind of almost like contradiction, but it's so true. Like you have to kind of put your foot down and be like, this is where I'm going to be happy. And like, or you did find happiness there. And you're like, I'm going to keep this for myself. And like being sure in who you are and all that is super important, because at the end of the day, when you move through life, you might not always get, the perfect environment. So you have to accept your environment, just like Janai said, and roll with it, because that's just life.
Yeah, I feel like if you're going to a PWI as a person of color, like, of course, like everyone deserves to feel safety, but almost like you are walking on eggshells a little bit. Like when your environment, who you're interacting with, like when you first get there, you kind of need to like warm up to people, and then people are like, oh, she's not that bad, type of thing. And then once you've like established a community, it could be smaller, like it could be a whole department or whatever, then being more vocal about your problems you're facing or problems your community facing. So I feel like when you come in like full steam, especially as a black woman, if you come in full steam, they're like, oh, she's just angry. And she's like what you were saying, like you just are more intense and like aggressive versus like coming in and like dipping your toe in and then being like, all right, this is an issue.
Yeah, I think you guys kind of touched on it. There's two sides to it. I think the first and foremost is you have to find your spot, like we said, find your safe space, find your circle. Find people who look like you that make you feel comfortable. But I think the second thing, which has been the hardest for me, but I'm getting better at it, is making the most of what the environment is. It is mostly white people out here, but like white people are cool too. Like the other day, like I just bought like a ski pass. Like we don't do that, like so like there's so much that like you can get out of the community that is here. That's different than what you're used to. And it's, there are hardships and there's struggles, but there's good parts of it too. Like I went on a 14er the other day, like, stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right. Getting out and doing different things, it's been eye-opening here because I haven't skied yet because I would hurt myself and I'm still competing. So I'm going to hold on until after. But I'm excited to try it because, granted, I come from Louisiana that's below sea level. So skiing is walking up a hill and rolling back down. But yeah, like there's like, it harks back to what you're saying and like what Janai said, like just accept your environment because it's not going to change. And like you need to be in a place you want to feel safe in. But like if you want to be here, accept the environment for what it is. Of course, work to change it, but also enjoy the parts you can.
Yeah, see, I think it's even more than accepting your environment. It's embracing it, like you said. Work harder to make it the best it can be and fix the problems. Just because it's great doesn't mean it can't be better. So that's why I say embrace it.
How do you embrace your environment and build your community?
To build your community, I feel like, blending, like just getting involved, I guess. Like you're in BSA, so like going to BSA meetings or going to like an art class or like an art club, like just finding things that you like to do that, it doesn't have to be like relying on race or anything. Like you could go read poems because you like to write poems. Like that, like just do, I like want to say like do what makes you happy and like just embrace like who you are. Because like if you're going skiing and like Black people don't really ski, well, like you want to go skiing and go find people who want to ski with you.
Yeah. Opening up to like your environment now too. Like I went skiing, I fell like every time though. I'm still on the baby slope. But it was nice though. I got to go with some friends, especially some of my teammates with like music type too. I was like, nope, it's either rap, R&B, hip hop, all that. But I'm slowly starting to build my country playlist.
Hey, country is not that bad.
It's not. It's really not.
I'd be getting
But
down to country.
I like
stuff.
country.
country can go. But it's
Anyone
just,
ask, no?
yeah, it's just like you said, just accepting it and just like evolving around it, like going and trying something new too. Like as a person, if you really genuinely want to open up your safety spots and just being there, I just go learn new things. It's never, just because you didn't grow up doing these things doesn't mean you can't do it or it's not for you. I feel like it's for everybody. You just have to do it.
Yeah, that experience speaks to like not just, it does speak to people of color, but also just like the college experience. Like, going into it, you're pretty alone, especially if you move to a different state or do whatever. You got to find new friends. So, like you all said, do something, find something you like to do. If it's writing poetry, skiing, if it's anime clubs or video game clubs or anything else, and then you'll find your community through doing those kind of things. Like the hardest part is to open yourself up and to be like, okay, I can go do things that I like without other people near me. I still struggle with that. Going like, I need to have somebody with me do it. It's like, do I really though? I enjoy it. I'm gonna go have fun by myself and maybe I'll meet somebody there. So yeah, finding your community works within like just doing things you like. And if you're looking for community within yourself, like within your race and identity, it's going to like BSA meetings, or if there's organization that identifies closely with your heritage, looking those up, because there's a lot on campus. So, we might not have it all in athletics, but this is a big university. So there's lots of things you can go out and find. So whether it's culturally or just hobbies, it's going out and doing it.
I promise, anything you're into, there's some other weird person who's into it. Because there's something they got like Quidditch and stuff. Like I ain't never heard of that. So I'm sure there's like a basket weaving team. I don't know. Like you can go, like you said, you can find your niche. There's something to do. I think that would be definitely one of my biggest advice is just like go explore, dip your toes in a bunch of different things. Like, I've done like Buffs Going Bananas. That was fun. That's a wacky group of people, and stuff like that. So, just explore.
Yeah, definitely.
How can CU Athletics and the University of Colorado, do better at belonging is and for people that's minorities on campus? Like, how can they do better?
I think there's two things that I think of initially. I think the first is understanding, and not just like on a surface level, but like truly understanding or like trying to like learn and like educate yourself on what it means to be a person of color, how it might feel. But I think the second thing is one of the things that bothers me the most with any institution, and CU is right up there with them all, is anytime something bad happens, bad things happen, which is cool, but we could do a lot better at apologies. We have this very cookie cutter set of apologies, and I think that's something that we really need to work on. And like we've said all this last hour, it comes with educating yourself, understand what the problem is, understand what just happened, why that was bad perhaps, and then when you release your apology, put some thought and effort into it.
I feel with that like apology thing, sometimes like statements that are made are like said to kind of appease people, but not like double down. Like something bad happened, like we're making the statement, and like race like issues and like people getting murdered is not controversial. Like that's not like, oh, we don't want to hurt this one person's feelings because like this one group thinks this and this other group is saying that like this is a problem, like especially with like George Floyd, like he was murdered. That's not right in anyone's book, and it shouldn't be right in anyone's book.
Yeah, I think, like you said, doubling down on what you believe in, people won't like what you have to say. And if it comes from a good place and it comes from what you believe in, like as a university, if we believe in diversity, we believe in equal rights, we believe in ending racism, that Black Lives Matter, then our apologies can't be cookie cutter. They can't be, well, I got to make sure I balance this. It has to be that we believe these things and this is why we believe them. Like you said, giving thought to it. And just overall, I think PWIs could take a chance to really just expand on what they offer to minority students, and also, go out there and like recruit in mostly minority communities and engage those communities and from a young age even, and do college tours for kids in middle school and show them that, hey, this is for you too. Because that's the biggest thing is like representation matters. We always say it does. And that, if a kid can't see themselves at a university, any university other than maybe HBCU, then that's part of the issue. Your brochure can have whoever you want on it, but are you actually talking to the people that you need to engage with?